thank you everyone for being here so close to the holidays. And it's great to get a chance to reconnect with Maud. I um, have nothing but respect for Maud and what you've been able to accomplish. I want to point out this first slide, this quote from Mother Jones. Mother Jones is an idol of mine. This is from her monument over in Mount Olive, Illinois. Pray for the dead, fight like hell for the living. For me, it's kind of appropriate for how I think about workforce development. I think a lot of what we used to do is passing, and what we need to be doing is going to be yet to defined. A lot of the industry practices have changed, and they're going to change for a while. But I'm Dr. Doug Swanson. I'm Associate Extension Professional in Labor and Workforce Development. And I also coordinate the Labor Studies Certificate Program off the UMSL campus. It's available throughout any of the University of Missouri campuses. When I came to the University of Missouri in 2017, I expected to be spending most of my time working on understanding more about the growing worker shortage, and I'll talk more about that later. But this has been an interesting journey. It led me to meeting up with some of you at the 2022 and 2023 MAWD conferences. I would encourage you to put questions you have in the chat. We can come up so you don't forget them or write them down. And I want to have time at the end to try to have a good conversation with all of you, because if I do my job well, I'm going to inspire more conversation than provide answers, because I don't know a lot of the answers for the problems we're facing. But as I mentioned, I was fortunate to be able to present at the 2022-2023 MAWD conferences around work we were doing with regards to the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative that we've now have in place, that was developed, through the extension. And while there, I had a couple of really good conversations with some people after the presentations that really got me thinking afterwards. They brought, just a couple of comments I made about understanding the worker shortage. We talked about, for them, it was kind of like they had never thought of understanding why we had the worker shortage. And that got me researching more about understanding the worker shortage as a avenue for talking about the Recovery Friendly program. And so that's where I've spent a lot of my time since. So it's a lot of what I've been doing the last year has because of the conversations that I had at those MAWD conferences. As I still leave this slide in my presentation. When we first started working on the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative 6 years ago, there was still a lot of misunderstanding about why we had a worker shortage, or even a denial that there was a worker shortage while the help wanted signs were continuing to bloom, and those hiring bonus signs, the numbers, the value of those bonuses kept going up. Now, in the post-COVID pandemic, I think we've come to the point where people understand that there really is a shortage, but there's still a lot of misunderstandings as to why the shortage is there. And like I said, for me, I've been studying the worker shortage since the 1990s. But first, let me point out that a colleague of mine, Matt Piesel, who does what I do. I'm based in the greater St. Louis area. Matt's in Kansas City, and coming out of COVID, Matt did a research project that looked at Missouri, and in particular the Kansas City greater metro area. And his analysis shows that we actually have more people in Missouri employed post-pandemic than we had pre-pandemic. And that certainly is reflected in his market area, the Kansas City market area. So, the fact that people are sitting home not working is not as much as a factor as it was talked about back then. At this slide here from the FRED, Federal Reserve Board, looked at the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics data. You can see this blue line. We were starting to grow more jobs than we had people before the pandemic. The pandemic did disrupt the workforce significantly. There's no doubt about that. what we saw is there's a lot of people with a lot more gray hair like me who may have left the workforce during the pandemic, for a variety of reasons, and two-income households realized that with a little bit of a lifestyle adjustment, they could become a one-income household and have a parent at home with the children or doing work with from home. How we get those graybeards back into the workplace, that's yet to be determined, because a lot of the ones I've talked to have said that, what they found about retirement is they love it. But, is there a market to get some of those folks back into the workplace? Possibly, but they're not going to come back in at a competitive position to what a 30-year-old is, for example. Now, getting those two-income households back from a one-income household, that may be something that that the workforce needs to look at. How do we get some of these folks who've left the workforce back in? That's going to be something we can look at. This slide here, just for the point of reference, um, workforce economists look at a 4% unemployment as being full employment. And many of you probably already are very aware of this. The workforce economists look at 4% of the workforce is always going to be unavailable due to injuries, health issues, births, wide variety of reasons. But so they consider 4% unemployment as full employment. Well, we had that back in 2008. And when the economy tanked and we went to 10% unemployment, it took us 10 years to recover from that. It only took us 18 months to recover from that after COVID. So we're at full employment. And I bring that up to point out that this is the tough part. Where do we find the future workers from? Because it's not the first time in the United States that we've had a worker shortage. The problem is the last time we had a worker shortage was called World War II. Actually, it started with World War I and then World War II, to meet the demands of producing the war goods needed while putting people in uniform to serve in the military. We transformed work as we know it in the United States. So over 6 million rural hand farmers, which is what historians call sharecroppers, and their families left the Mississippi Delta during that period and went to St. Louis and Kansas City and Erie, Pennsylvania, and Chicago and Detroit, et cetera, to work in industry and to go into the military. We also saw during World War II, for the first time, well, I'm not advancing my slides, there we go. We saw industry actually courting women to go into the workforce. Prior to that, women were primarily excluded from a lot of the industry jobs. During World War II, we actually courted women into the workplace. And since World War II, those dynamics have not returned. Why would those rural hand farmers want to go back to the Mississippi Delta to sharecrop? Since World War II, female participation rate in the workforce has never been below 26%. Currently, it's almost 52%. So rock on, ladies. Those spigots that we used to solve the worker shortage back then, we don't have to turn back on now. So we've got to look at the workforce differently than what we did the last time we had a shortage like this. We don't have at our disposal the available tools to replace the workers that we're looking for. So what I'm looking at, what I'm going to talk about here next, is looking at the underutilized parts of the workforce, or that have been marginalized during this period since World War II. When the soldiers came home and the rural hand farmers didn't go back to the sharecropping, and the women didn't leave the workforce, we have had a surplus of workers pretty much since World War II until about 10 years ago. That surplus started to wane 10 years ago. We're now feeling the impact right now pretty severely. But here in Missouri, we're looking at our high school graduation rates hitting bottom in 2026 or 2028. So what we're experiencing today is going to get a little bit worse. And then once it hits bottom, It's not a basketball. It's not going to bounce back up. So this tighter workforce is going to become the new norm. Um, there are places we can look for workers. There are there are work or segments of our workforce that have been underutilized. But first, let me talk about the big elephant in the room of understanding where the workers have gone is, yes, the boomers. I'm one of them. I'm not retired yet, but I'm one who will be retiring sooner than some of you. But when the workforce um, was overstaffed, and over 25% of the workforce was one generation, there was a lot of practices put into place, like zero tolerance, that excluded people right away from the workplace because we had a drawer full of resumes. It was easy to replace somebody. It allowed for some biases and stigmas to be created that are still in place today. This is where we have to be looking at whether or not we can find ways to circumvent some of those practices as we recreate or reimagine the workforce of the future. I'm going to show you 3 slides in a row here. This is, and unfortunately, that little screen that tells you that I'm sharing screens covers this up. But this is the U.S. labor force from 2021, looking at these broad bands here of 25 to 64. Well, when we go up just 10 years, look how we're aging, and if we go 10 more years to 2021. Look at how the workforce has spread out. In that 20-year period, the workforce in the US really only went up 1%. But during that same 20-year period, the 16 to 24-year-old demographic dropped by 8%, while the 55 and older doubled. So when that 55 and older demographic continues to march towards retirement, we don't have those recent high school graduates to backfill those vacancies. And these are national numbers. Again, my colleague Matt Pizzo over in Kansas City, he looked at Missouri specific numbers, and actually we're trending a little bit better than the national numbers. Our high school graduation rates are a slight bit better, and we don't have quite the aging population, but we still have 60+% of the population that's going to become retirement eligible in the next 20 years. Another colleague of ours, actually a former colleague of ours, Dr. Mark White, did this study when he was in Missouri. He's now over at University of Illinois. But Mark looked at the 2010, 2020 census data and just aligned the ages. And just looking at the age groups, compared to 10 years ago versus the 2020 census, and taking 2 assumptions, which we know are going to be false. If the assumption is every high school graduate of the state of Missouri stays in Missouri, which it would be lovely if that was true, but we know that's not going to happen. But if that was true, and if we did not create any new jobs this decade, which we know isn't true either, but if those two truths were substantiated, we would still end the decade 50,000 workers shorter than we started because of the number of people becoming retirement eligible. Remember that 50,000 number, because I'm going to talk about that here again in this next slide. This is not a Missouri problem alone. All of our contiguous states, with the exception of Iowa, saw their 2020 census numbers as smaller than the 2010 census numbers. Missouri and Iowa were the only ones who saw a net growth of the states contiguous to Missouri. And actually in Missouri, we had almost 13,000 more deaths than births. We would have had a negative growth if not for almost 35,000 people moving to Missouri in the last decade. We're a nation of immigrants. And part of the problem is in the last 5 years, we have 2 of the lowest immigration rates in our nation's history. So I'm making the case for understanding why we've got this shortage. The spigots we've had, people going into the workplace, people through births, people going into the workplace through immigration, people going into the workplace due to culture change. We don't have those spigots to turn back on. Excuse me a second. A few years ago, an organization in St. Louis called Focus St. Louis recruited me into an impact fellows program with Dr. Marty Leathers, who many of you know. And that program was to look at trying to identify barriers to employment for people who are justice involved. The work group that I was on with Marty, we created this toolkit that's available at the St. Louis University. You can go to this website and you scroll part way down, you see a blue button, you click on that and you get this downloaded for free. And what we did is we created a toolkit to help businesses understand and deconstruct the stigmas around hiring people who are justice involved, as well as helping people who are justice involved talk about that involvement. And I bring that up to talk about, while doing that study, Federal Bureau of Prisons, a study showed that in 2016, city, county, and state minimum and medium security prisons, the staffing ratio is 4-to-1. So for every person incarcerated, we take 4 additional people out of the workplace. So for every 10,000 people we incarcerate, we're taking 50,000 people out of the workplace who could be redeployed in the workplace someplace else. We checked in on that study a few years later, 2021, and at the maximum security, this federal and state maximum security prisons, that staffing ratio is 9-to-1. So for every 10,000 people incarcerated, 90,000 additional workers come out of workplace employment just to feed the prison industrial complex. So these are ways to, and as a nation that incarcerates the highest percentage of its population of any industrialized nation, this is a way of looking at where are all the workers going? Well, some of them are going to some of these institutions that are swelling and taking people out of the workplace elsewhere. I'm not trying to say we need to turn unlock the doors and empty the prisons, but I'm pointing out that there is a cascading effect of incarceration when we have to staff up those prisons as well. And that's feeding in to the worker shortage, the growing worker shortage. We have a nation that is a few of us were talking at the beginning about it's been a busy year. Yes, I'm hearing that a lot. I want to do some research next year to look at overlay some workforce data with some health trends, because we are seeing an increased number of suicides, the increased number of demands or requests for mental health care because of people being fatigued, worn out, and in need of getting assistance. Is that adding to the number of people who are dropping out of the workplace, that if we had a different safety net that could keep them in the workplace while they were getting the care that they needed. These are some of the things we need to be looking at perhaps differently going forward. I recently attended a training that OSHA was speaking at, and it's even hit the radar scope of OSHA. OSHA puts it at 10% of, they're looking at the impact of the workforce using illegal substances as well as alcohol, and the impact that that's having on our economy as well as our workers' comp claims. And they look at alcohol and illegal drugs as symptoms of the greater problem. They don't know what the greater problem is either, but they're looking at the increased drug use, increased alcohol consumption as being symptomatic. And they're putting that cost at $100 billion annually, and that this, as we see the usage go up, they've even drilled their data down to they're looking at some of the industries. The presentation I was at was for the construction building trades, and they shared this data for that trade. I suspect that other trades are not dissimilar. We're going to see the numbers maybe move a little bit, but that trend from looking at other data I've looked at. I'm going to guess that regardless of what industry, those percentages are going to be similar in other industries as well. So we've got a workforce that is shrinking, and it's feeling the pain, and it's self-medicating in ways that are unhealthy for the workers and unhealthy for the employers, and it's costing our economy as well. Uh, I raised this issue to talk about the opioid use disorder. We haven't seen a study like we had with the prisons. I'm interested to see if we can get a study going and what it would look like. But how many people, we can look at how many people are getting out of the workplace due to opioid use disorder, but we don't know how many people are being redeployed differently to work in support fields or support industries to assist those people or to assist the family members. What is the cascading effect of opioid use disorder on not just the individual, but the lives that they associate with, the coworkers, the family members? We do know that a study coming out of American Society of Medical Practitioners has put opioid use disorder as a $10 billion a deficit to the economy. And that number, or that study, as well as this study, for those of you who may have attended my recovery friendly presentations in 22 and 23, this study here, out of Purdue with Dr. Kruger, talks about, this study here he looked at, and this was just one demographic, the white male, because they're the largest demographic, but the numbers were similar. They range from 9% to 12%. But of any demographic in the workplace, about 10% of the people are out of the workplace temporarily or permanently due to opioid use disorder, of which half are taking medication on a day within the day before responding to the survey. These are and again, my colleague Matt Piesel, he drilled down and looked at the Missouri specific, and you can see in 16 years the use of opioid prescriptions increased by over 1,000% in the state of Missouri alone, and that resulted in a 3% decline in available workers during that same time period. And again, the numbers we're looking at, the people who are out of the workplace for opioid use disorder, as well as the family members, caregivers, it's not just the loss of them in the workplace. It's when they're not working, they're not getting paid, and they're not spending those paychecks in their communities, and the cascading roll up of those wages. The old rule of economics is $1 in wages gets recirculated in the community 7 times before it leaves the community. So if you're paying somebody $1,000, by the time they spend their money on groceries, gas, mortgage, etc., that dollar is recirculating in that community to the equivalent of $7,000. And what this results in is almost $40 billion in state and federal taxes that are not generated because these people are not working. And so this is what led us to create the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative in Missouri as a way to have facilitated conversations about not only re-employing people who've left the workplace due to addiction, got into recovery, they're sober now, there's stigmas around hiring them. Let's deconstruct those stigmas, hire them, and get them back in the workplace. But better yet, if you have somebody in the workplace who needs time off to go into treatment, let's have a conversation about letting them do that, hold their place. If they're gone for usually the treatment is 4 weeks. It may take a week or two to get them in or out. So if they're gone for 6 weeks, what's the likelihood you could be able to recruit that replacement in 6 weeks anyhow? Pretty difficult. And what's the likelihood you're going to be able to train that person up in that same 6-week period? So if we start to rethink some of these practices of letting somebody take an unpaid leave of absence, and they can come, if they want to come back into the workplace without loss of seniority or pay grade, you can retain the investment you've already put into recruiting that person and training that person. And the reason for that is this study out of Missouri Hospital Association, they're the ones who drilled down and went beyond the usual three in determining the cost of addiction. Usual three is law enforcement, EMS, and incarceration. And what they did was they looked at the cost of the impact of a two-income household becoming a one-income household, or one-income household being a no-income household. They looked at the impact on the children not getting the childhood health care because of income, not having access to the income to get those child care healthy starts, get the good nutrition habits. What's the impact of those children being able to not go on to post-secondary education, or maybe even not even finishing high school? They put that cost, and this is on 2016 data, they put that cost at $1.8 million an hour is what it's costing the state of Missouri. And that's not a 40-hour work week. That's each and every day of the year. This study has not been replicated, but we know from the opioid use disorder numbers that those numbers are higher than they were in 2016. So this number is estimated to be more like $1.8 million today. So this is a real fast run through on some of the stresses hitting our workplace and why, understanding why we have the worker shortage that we have. What I don't have is a silver bullet answer for us. I do believe that we're going to have to look at all forms of changes to how we retain people more so than recruit people. For much of my career, the emphasis was on how do we recruit? How do we, how do we get the people who are already trained to do what we need to do to come work for us? And I think the dynamics are going to need to shift to more of how do we retain the people we have and retain the investment we have made in getting those people to come to work for us in the first place. And by the way, if you want more information about the recovery-friendly workplace, that QR code will take you right to the website, or you can contact me and I'll be happy to give you any information, you or answer any questions you have on the recovery-friendly workplace initiative. But that's a fast look at how we've gotten to where we're at with a little bit of a projection of it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I really want to hear more from you about your experiences, what you're facing, and how can we help find ways to create better solutions, because it's going to get tighter before the workplace gets smaller or gets back to where we think it should have been. So any questions at this point? I think, is it okay to just ask everybody to just unmute and ask their questions?
Yep, absolutely. Feel free to unmute or put your comments in the chat.
Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
My name's Corinne Thurman, and I'm from the Central Region. And one of the things that I've noticed, I'm a member of the Lions Club, and we do a lot of things in the community. And one of the conversations that we've had over the last year is the shortage of doctors and attorneys, and some of those higher education fields in rural counties. Have you seen any studies on the effects of all of this with those?
Yeah, there's a lot of studies out there. There's actually a very good book called Hollowing Out of the Middle that talks about the plight of rural America. And it's not unique. Again, it's not unique to Missouri, but a lot of what people refer to as the flyover states, are having a tough time retaining children just to carry on the family businesses. whether it's farming or the hardware store or the auto repair store in some of these rural towns. It's hard to find the children to carry on those jobs. It's doubly hard to find people to come in for those high-skilled jobs. Healthcare is really strapped in these rural communities because it's not just a problem of attracting the talent. It's funding the technology that you need in some of these in the hospitals to be really helpful for the communities. So it's been studied a lot. There are some communities have tried. They've set up foundations where they help young professionals with tuition or medical school debt reduction. For every year you stay, we'll give you an extra $10,000 that goes right to your student debt. Some of the assistance that's been provided to the young professionals is they provided the house or at least a home loan for them to buy the house, the down payment for the house. But it's not unique to just Missouri, and it's a real problem. And COVID again exacerbated this a little bit too, because people got to work from home. And so some of these rural communities said, great, we can get these people to come live in these rural communities. Well, if you don't have the social network, the theater, the nightclubs, the whatever, with the things that young people want to do. And the town I grew up in is now a bedroom community of retired farmers. I'm sorry, that's what it is. Why would a 20-year-old want to move there? The dating pool is about this shallow, for one thing, and there's not much social for them to do. I mentioned hollowing out of the middle. And before that, I saw a comment about somebody working Department of Corrections. Yeah, those are brutal jobs. And I'm not, my observation about the staffing ratios is not belittling, a correctional. Those are brutal jobs. And society wants correctional facilities. They want law enforcement, but they don't want to, like here, I think the person's saying working 70+ hours with no relief because we're not able to attract enough staffing for those jobs, and in part because I don't think they're getting paid or not getting compensated commensurate. And now that the pool of available workers has become so shallowed, it's easier for somebody to job hop. I should have mentioned that too. There's the notion out there, the new generation going to the workplace are all job hoppers. Have you heard that? It's true, but it was true with my generation too. Statistically, my generation job hopped just as much as the current workforce does. The difference is they have more opportunities than I did, because I did this presentation for Association of General Contractors, Safety Coordinators, and somebody from North Carolina came up to me afterwards and said they're at 3.2% unemployment. Remember I said 4% was about as low as you can get? They're at 3.2% unemployment. And for every one of those people underemployed or unemployed, there's 3 available jobs. So if they fully employed everybody, they still didn't have enough people for all the jobs they have. So if you're a worker who doesn't mind starting over again, it's easy to job hop right now because there's a lot more opportunities than I had in 1980, let's say. Great question.
My name's Patricia Rogers. I'm also from the Central Region, and one of the things that I've noticed significant increases in the number of high school students who are graduating high school, but they don't have the basic skills needed to go into even entry-level employment. It's discouraging when I have a high school student who's getting ready to graduate and they can only print their name. They can't do basic math. There's an increased number of students with individual education plans, IEPs. They did not get the remedial education that they really needed. I think education is always at the forefront of my thinking, but I think we've got to take a hard look at the quality of education that we have in America. Um, we're not graduating students who are prepared. We're not building positive ethics into their education. I mean, some of the kids show up for class, the majority of them don't. Very few actually come into class Monday through Friday. So it's discouraging when I see that happening. And I think that's another category that you have to take a look at when you're considering how these jobs are going to be filled in the future. The other thing that I see is that everyone needs a higher wage. Everyone needs to make the most money that they can because the cost of living is so extremely high. But very few people are willing to put forth the hard work it takes to get those wages. People tend to back up if they are expected to be at work early in the morning or stay late. There's a request for more technology-driven jobs than there are just manual labor jobs out there. And so our construction labor is suffering, and some of our manufacturing companies are suffering because they don't have enough bodies to fill those jobs. So I ask myself all the time, for these men that you report that are not working, I know how difficult it is to get people into substance abuse treatment. So where are they? If they're not working and they don't have a job, how are they surviving?
Well, you touched on several things, Patricia, and I agree with you identified a couple of my pet projects or pet peeves. And you're recording this, I'm going to say it anyhow. Part of the problem with education is we need to get politicians out of it and get businesses back into it. I say that to say, there are lots of studies out there that show that over the last, in particular, the last 20 years, the teaching to the test has been abysmal failure. Because we want everybody to be able to take the same standardized test in all schools, in all states, in all parts of the country. But that's like saying, telling the elephant and the monkey and the snake, you're all gonna be tested the same. Now go climb a tree. Who's gonna be successful? And what we've done is that takes up the time of educators to teach to the test. And so what's been sacrificed is a lot of those, what I call life skills classes. I think back in my day, they called it shop class, industrial arts class, senior living classes, where you learned a lot of those basic skills, like, that would help you transition into the workplace. But those are decisions made by policymakers, and I'm not one of them. But what I do believe strongly is that employers, have too little presence at the table to talk about what they need in a workforce. And that's something that there are ideas, and some businesses are trying to interact with their communities and do some partnering with the education systems, and at their disposal to help, get the workforce that they need. That works if you have the space, if you have the staffing, if you have the demand, that you can make that worthwhile for the educators. But if you're a small shop, that's tougher. But I don't want to leave on that. I want to point out that I do think that a big part of what has to happen is businesses need to be more involved in helping the educators understand what the skills are that people need. And now I'm going to tell you that the University of Missouri hates it when I say this. We have to stop telling every student that the only way to be success is to go to college. We told 3 generations of the workforce that, and what we have is 2 generations who are struggling under student debt burden, and it's impacting, in everything from inability to buy homes to having smaller families or no families because they can't afford it. And at the same time, we don't have enough tool and die workers. We don't have enough carpenters. We don't have enough electricians. When your HVAC doesn't work, your furnace doesn't work on Thanksgiving or Christmas Eve, and your family's coming over tomorrow, and you call that, the HVAC shop, and they say it's triple time. Do you tell them you'll wait till Monday? No, you tell them to come on over. And those are jobs that don't require college degrees. And that is a precursor to what we're in my environment, they refer to it as de-skilling the workforce. And maybe you all use that term too, or familiar with that term. It used to be if you were a high school graduate, you could find a career pretty easily and have a family supportable wage. And I'm going to talk about Wentzville GM plant. I don't know if anybody's familiar or works with with the GM plant over in Wentzville, but at one time they had 500 people in the paint shop. And you just had to have a high school or a GED, high school diploma or GED to be in the paint shop. Now they have robots doing the painting. They only have less than 200 people in the paint shop. And most of those are robot paramedics. They install and fix the robots. So they have less people doing it, but those people are working at a higher level. And so they're getting paid more too. And so there's less entryway for the high school only diploma or a GED to be able to get to that job. But that's an example of GE, or not GE, GM, takes those workers then, and then they train them up. They bear the cost of the education to take that worker who's been proven to be a good, reliable worker, and they train them up to that higher paying job. So that is an example of how this is a larger employer, but some employers are dealing with their de-skilled workforce by going back to paying for the cost of training instead of saying, go to some technical college, get the certificate on how to be a robot paramedic, and then I'll think about hiring you. That has shifted the burden and cost of training onto the worker, like a degree, but then you don't have the job. The employer is now shifting to paying for that education, but they're doing it with the proven workforce that or the proven worker who's been with that workforce for a while. I think I answered a couple of your questions, Patricia. I'm not sure if I answered all of them.
Thank you.
But I see there's a question from, I think, Debbie Wilson about people wanting to work virtual jobs. Yes, for good or bad, one of the scourges that's going to be with us, at least for this generation, is, because of COVID, so many people were able to work virtually. And they were told that they were successful at it. And now they're being told they have to go back to the workplace. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. But a lot of workers still want to work virtually. But we also have people coming into the workplace who've never worked virtually and don't have those skills. And so it has been discussions about, is that something that the college, or is it more appropriately the community college, or who would be the right forum to create a curriculum to teach people to be virtual workers? Now we don't need to reteach them how to use Windows 360. There's lots of that out there, but we need to teach them some of those other skills that go along with that. But so this is kind of that gobbledygook coming out of COVID, is the workforce. Some places have gone 100%. They found that in the University of Missouri, I'll throw them under the bus. they've said that they can save a lot of money by reducing the amount of office space by 10%. And so some businesses have chosen to reduce the amount of office space, go all virtual. Other businesses are going all in person. And I think the bigger majority are doing some kind of a hybrid. But and I agree with that. I think I'm comfortable working from home. Don't get me wrong, I love it. But I also need to be around people. And those hallway conversations, the old water cooler talks, they don't happen if you're working at home. And while this is lovely to have this conversation with you, we don't build relationships like this. Not as easily as when we're in person at the conference. So Debbie Wilson, I hope that answers your question. Michelle, you have your hand up.
I do. On the flip side of talking about working from home, you know, the pros and cons of it, has anybody looked at the fact of somebody who has gotten used to working from home and then returns back to the office, how easily distracted they can become? They weren't used to the noise level. They've gotten used to, you know, that they can control their environment, that they can, you know, it's just not as loud, it's not as distracting, and they find that they're actually they're struggling to stay on task working in an office again.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, Michelle. I haven't seen any studies on that. But I think you're right. You know, you get used to having your own tempo when you don't have to be around other people. They talk about sitting around in your jammy pants and putting on a nice shirt, but it's more than just that. You forget how to be social. If all of your work is in 60-minute blocks of Zoom meetings, you forget how to be social.
Or how to be respectful of others who are trying to work, because you don't remember the tone level that you need to use or anything like that. So I'm just curious if that could be causing some issues for people to want to return to work, because it just makes it more distracting and a little bit harder to keep up the pace.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think these are some of the challenges that we need to keep working through. And I'm going to scan back if somebody asked for the QR or the link for the Just Talent. And I see somebody commented about parents and children being in charge of education. Yes, I don't disagree. My point is, I don't think businesses have been listened to enough about what businesses need from education or need from students coming out of the educational systems. That was my point. I think, Jennifer, you had your hand up first.
Yes, I wanted to make a comment on, I know earlier we had talked about the rural sites, so especially when it comes to medical and things like that. I recently talked with a vice president of HR he's an American Legion officer that I was trying to work with because I am a veteran, I'm a DevOps, so I work with veterans finding them jobs. But
Right.
I reached out to contact him about that, and it just so happened, he's looking because they're in such need. He was telling me that down where he's at near Cape Girardeau, they're teaming up with other schools in the area because they're finding that, it's hard to get someone that's grew up in the city to come to these places. But if they have a student that, that's what they want to do and they're from that area, it's more likely that, they will come back and they will stay there. And so that's what they're trying to target right now is just the students that are in that area to, get them trained, doctors, medical assistants and things like that. So that way they have a steady flow of workforce down there. Because I think they're even starting they're teaming up with a local school near Cape Girardeau. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. And then I did want to ask one question: do we think a lot of it all seems to be related to each other, but with I actually did an entire paper on the trade because I came from the automotive world. Just 2 months ago, I was working for a fleet management company, but this is more what I want to do. But do we think it's a lot to do with the declining birth rates across the entire
Oh, yeah.
world. That because I mean
Oh, yeah.
it's everywhere. There's so many countries that do not like it's negative numbers, and we're going to keep seeing that until things get fixed at the end.
Yeah, great observation, Jennifer. And I should add that to my presentation. I wrote a paper when I was doing my doctoral program on the declining birth rate in the U.S. Um, Economists look at, and there's a formula they use about the number of women 18 to 50 years old, and versus how many babies are born. Basically, it comes down to are there as many babies born this year as there are expected retirements in 18 years. That's basically what they look at, but they do it more in much more complicated fashion. We have not achieved that since 1973.
Wow.
1973. Like I said, this is not, the worker shortage should not be new. We just weren't paying attention, or we chose to ignore it. The people who trained you weren't doing anything wrong in workforce development. They just had a different set of cards to play. And the people who trained them had a different set of cards to play. We don't have the same number of cards. Now, and the whole issue of we don't have as big as families. And then I mentioned, the stresses of student debt loan is playing in on decisions to have children or not, or how many children to have. And that's just one of the many factors. I ought to dig that paper out and include a slide on that, but you're right. It's, but I'm not telling everybody to go out and have babies right now. That creates a whole new set of problems. And it doesn't put anybody in the workforce for another 18 to 24 years. So, although as a proud grandpa, I love playing with the little ones, and I always had their back. Ophelia.
Hi. So I have more so of a comment. There's a lot of moving parts that are going around in my head. So as a current practitioner working as a career coach with career seekers, as a consultant and trainer working with business and industry, I've seen I wish there was a coalition, and I guess that's my question. Is there a coalition that consists of workforce development professionals and educators? Because with workforce and WIOA funding, there are mandatory partners. So those business and industries are able to come to the table. But in education, unless there's an advisory committee of some sort, there aren't those mandatory partners. And I've seen, just working with youth and young adults, they have become disconnected with the value of education. They don't see the relevancy and why they're learning X, Y, and Z and how it correlates to a career. And then you have business and industry who are having a hard time finding skilled workers. And I think, and my second question, I guess, is do you think the Great Resignation has continued to have an impact? Because now career seekers, they have began to really understand their value, and they focus more on what they value. If they value flexibility and being able to work from home and just have the autonomy that they're not able to have maybe in a traditional work setting, that may make them a little bit more hesitant in entering the workforce as we all knew it, reporting to an office. So question, is there a coalition of maybe workforce development professionals and educators, and how to marry the two together? I think we could make some great strides if that exists.
There's probably some correlations out there. I don't think of any. I can't think of any off the top of my head. But one of the great problems is defining educators. I work for the university, and so I'm going to speak blasphemy and say that part of what universities want to do is talk about how do we get those kids to come to our colleges or our universities. And what I often talk about is the apprenticeship programs, because a lot of students, like you said, are not seeing the relevancy of continuing education, especially at the cost. I don't know. I used to do a survey, just a show of hands survey. how many of you are working in the degree field that you pursued in college? Very few people do, so, but we have the student debt. Or how, and in St. Louis, it's a startling number of people who have the debt without the degree. And so education as a vocation is under scrutiny as well. And so the partnerships are somewhat disingenuous, and because that what they're trying to do is find ways to create programs for students, and I'm not opposed to that. But that's not always helping businesses get the students from high school, get them the training they need to go into the workplace without getting the degree. And you talked about the Great Resignation. Yeah, it's going to continue to, it's continuing to play itself out, because what people learned during COVID, when they had time to actually look for jobs, you saw low income retail go into high end retail, or light manufacturing, or light manufacturing went into heavy manufacturing, or people in the service industry went into what you saw people realize that they had different opportunities. And once they realize that they have those opportunities, and they start to see, as I mentioned, the number of jobs that are available, you're seeing people, tolerate less and start over easier. I've got a nephew who's his plan is never work for anybody for more than 5 years until he starts his own business. And so far, it's worked out well for him. His sister works for the same person who hired her out of college. Her next promotion is going to be a VP. I'm losing track of the questions in the chat box, but
I do need to hop in, Doug, just to be
Okay.
mindful of everybody's time. We have 2 minutes remaining, and I do need to cover some MAWD updates. So could you put your email address in the chat? I think that there were some additional hands that were raised, but unfortunately, we just don't have any more time to take questions or whatnot.
Happy to continue this conversation offline with anybody, or especially after the first of the year. But I'll put my email address in. Thank you again.
Thank you. Well, real quick, I just want to say thank you guys for joining us today. This has been an incredible turnout. In fact, I didn't realize that we had a 100-person capacity for Zoom meetings, and we were at capacity. So thank you all for just joining us today. I do want to set aside my Office of Workforce Development hat and put on my MAWD hat and just kind of go over some updates for you guys. First, just want to remind you about our 2025 MAWD conference. The theme for this year is Forging the Future. We will continue to be at the Branson Convention Center. So the dates for MAWD will be April 23rd through the 25th. There at the Branson Convention Center. I know that I have a lot of OWD staff who are present. I just want to highlight that you don't need to do anything in terms of registration. We will handle that here out of our Truman office, and we're making determinations on how many folks we will be sending. So just be aware of that. If you are interested in presenting, we are still collecting proposals. So please make sure that you submit your proposal to Tara Lappett. You can go to the website mawd.us and go to events and pull the request for proposal template and put together your proposal for us and send in for us to review. Those RFPs are due by the end of the month, December the 31st. And again, the website, I'm going to put that in the chat for you real quick so you can have it and easily click on it. Oh, I put it in there wrong. But I do encourage you guys to consider submitting a proposal. And Doug, you as well, or any other colleagues from the University Extension Office, we'd love to have you back. And early bird pricing, we have early bird pricing going through the end of January. That's $150 saving. Again, another plug for OWD staff. You don't have to worry about doing your registrations. We will handle that here out of the Truman office. So if you are a current member of MAWD and you are going to go to the conference, I encourage you to sign up and get registered for the conference by the end of January to get that early bird pricing. And, one really important thing I'd like to highlight is if you are a MAWD member and you want to go to the conference, but there's just no funding through your local organization or whatnot, we do have MAWD scholarships. This is a members only benefit. It provides up to $500 towards professional development opportunities. So you can use that to attend the MAWD conference. You could use it to complete a training that you've been wanting to complete. If you're not a certified workforce development professional through NADP and you would like to pursue that, you could use that scholarship to go towards that credentialing. You could also use it to go towards NADP. So those are a variety of things that you can consider, but you do have to be a member. So go to the website if you'd like some additional details on the scholarship, but just remember that you can use it to go to this year's conference as well. In addition to that information in terms of the conference, we do provide some awards, and those awards are based off your nominations. So we collect award nominations for Workforce Rookie of the Year, the Workforce Keystone Award, Partner Collaboration Award, and the Local Excellence Award in Partnership. Now, I'm just giving you the titles because it would take me about 5 minutes to describe each of those awards. So please go to the website mawd.us and go to awards and read over the descriptions and submit a nomination. Those nominations come from our memberships. And so just highly encourage you to review that and think about the people that you work with day in and day out, those partners that you work with, and submit a nomination for us. And I'm sorry, I overlooked one. We also have a Professional of the Year award as well. And we are also looking to fill some additional board positions. So this year we will have some board elections. The following positions that are open are the president-elect, the secretary, public information, professional development, and we have 3 at-large positions. So all of the positions on your screen are 2-year terms beginning July 1, 2025 through June 30th of 2027. I can just tell you from my own personal experience that serving on the MAWD board has been one of the best professional development experiences that I've had during my time here in workforce development. So if that is something that you're interested in, I highly encourage you to consider that. So again, go to the website. You'll find some more information about what is it to serve on the board and a little bit more about the positions. And if you have any questions whatsoever, you can always reach out to anybody on the board with any questions that you may have. Last plug for our website, mawd.us. That's where you can find everything that I talked about and more. And that was all. That was a lot of information, and I said it really fast. But if anybody has any questions about that really quick spiel, I'm going to put my email address in the chat in case you'd like to reach out directly. So again, Doug, thank you so much for joining us today. Members, thank you so much for being here. And if you're not currently a MAWD member, check out the website for some details, and we hope to see you all in April. Have a great rest of your afternoon and happy holidays. Bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.